production design, for example, of Goodfellas is somewhat different, of course, from the production design of Raging Bull. I mean, Raging Bull is black and white and takes place in the 40s and into the early 50s, I think. We very often did tests on black and white film of the black and white interiors, black and white clothes, that sort of thing. It was a very different approach. But in Goodfellas, it was to be truthful to the time and place. And what had to do with costumes and particularly production design or the use of actual locations. And I just drew on memory, really, a great deal. Some of it is a heightened memory, you know, but the Copacabana, I could tell you, was quite accurate. I was there a lot, and that's what usually happened. I didn't go in the back way, but if we did get to sit at the ringside by the dance floor, inevitably, when we thought we had great seats, inevitably there'd be a table that would come in and be placed in front of you, and these wise guys would be sitting there. So you couldn't see anything. But in any event, we just really had to be as truthful as possible to the period, but also what I remember. Now, when you take it to Casino, which was an extension of Goodfellas in a way, it goes to Las Vegas in the 70s, and we had to, I feel, give the impression, first of all, 2:3:5 aspect ratio as opposed to 1:8:5. It was wider screen. Give the impression of a spectacle. The spectacle, like a Las Vegas show, basically. You could say glitz, you could say theatrical to a certain extent. Yes, you know, but a lot of this is played out against theatrical backgrounds. I mean, one of the best films made about Las Vegas was in 59, I think, or 60. It was Ocean's 11, the original one. First half of the picture is like a time capsule of Vegas at that time in widescreen and color, what these places really look like, and shot on location. Here, we had to make references, so to speak, to certain places. We couldn't use names of the Stardust Casino. We had to make up another one because there were certain technical problems in terms of some of the people still being alive and not wanting any connection with it. The major element that changed in Casino was to blast it open and to make it like a sequences of fireworks almost across the screen, starting with the explosion in the car and the Saul and Elaine Bass titles. The idea was to make it a Vegas nightclub act, really. And so we went that way, along with, first time I worked with Bob Richardson, along with the lighting and the camera moves and that sort of thing. We had references for everything. I mean, there were pictures, there was some motion pictures, not really a lot, but lots of stills, lots of use of color that we saw, costumes we knew. The idea of the Tangier Hotel, which was really supposed to be the Stardust or something. I'm not quite sure anymore. But in any event, we knew that it had a certain tone or quality to it. For example, a palm tree would look a certain way in one of the real hotels, and we could take a palm tree and make it another way. Tangier with the T, I believe, became like a sword. And so all of these things, as long as it captured the spirit of Vegas of the 70s, that's what we were going for. And then I told him to open it up, to go even more, to go further. The excess is what the film's about too, you know, excess and control and power. So we have, the idea was not to shy away from it, to really, really dive into it. And I use the word immerse, but you really do live and breathe it when you're making that film, you know, all the way through to finally when it opened up, when it opened. And I remember going to Cinema 1, I think it was on 59th Street or whatever, on 3rd Avenue, introducing the film, saying hello to a few people, walking home, locking the door. I lived 2 blocks away. Went home alone, locked the door, leave me alone. That was it. It was the way you see that film, the manic nature of it and the splashiness of the whole thing and the people that were involved in it and everything. I just, you needed to be alone for a while afterwards. But in any event, I felt we could really, in that particular film, open it up and make it more lush in a way, because that's part of the attraction. It's part of the attraction of that world. Particularly the show scenes, the scenes of the showgirls on stage, and that's all backstage and this sort of thing. So that's contrasted later, with the confrontations. For example, there's a wonderful scene, I think, between Joe Pesci and Bob De Niro in the desert. There's nothing there, just the two of them in the desert arguing, and you feel the change. Again, the contrast builds so that you see the people who really control things, the older Italian guys in a place called Back Home, because we weren't allowed to say Chicago at that point. There was a technical issue, legal issue. So we just said Back Home. And you'd see they basically meet or congregate in places that are pretty, modest, really, on back of garages. They have a little place where they could sit and have coffee and talk. Let the clowns and the jokers and the strong-arm guys go to Vegas and make us money, basically. So that, again, played, I think, really well against the flashiness of Vegas. There was something about the quality of the Pasolini films that had a sense of, as I say, a free quality to them that didn't seem encumbered by too much production design, yet they really had a sense of authenticity. Danilo Donato was the production designer and costumes, Piero Tosi, all these people working together. And I really admired doing so much with so little. And for example, in Medea, Maria Callas's necklace is wooden pieces of wood, I believe. All of this kind of thing, for me, opened up another world. Add to that the extreme, when one takes it to the extreme, and that's Fellini's Satyricon, where you do feel that, particularly in Satyricon, that it's science fiction, but in reverse. It's sci-fi in reverse. And so in Gangs of New York, particularly, Gangs of New York, I did intentionally create as much as I could with a sense of a naturalistic setting, but with that element of science fiction in reverse. And I must say that even in Gangs, there are things that were not in the film that do feel like science fiction, and that come from reality, that come from historical records. But I wanted to take you into another world and time. So the inspiration from the Italian filmmakers enabled me to do that. And so Dante Ferretti, for example, designing the 5 points, was understood intrinsically what to do. And then we take it further. For example, the Satan Circus, I believe it was, Bill the Butcher's club or bar, had a long bar, and we looked at it and we designed, and I said, let's put a tree in the middle, because they're working and they're building these places that are, these are not this is not a strata of society that has a construction and that has designed, that is sanctioned by the government or the city council and this sort of thing. They're just building as they go. It's almost like shantytown in a way. So if there's a tree in the middle, working around the tree. It's almost as if they're coming out of the earth and they're trying to live in this seemingly urban environment. It's all being created, different from the towns in the West, where you'll see, like in McCabe and Mrs. Miller, the wood is new, it's clean, it's not worn, it's not weathered, because it is fresh. But New York, judging from the writing judging from the historical accounts and first images, actual photographs of things in the 1870s, I'd say, and being around some of the buildings growing up downtown on the Lower East Side, some of the buildings were definitely from the 18th century. There was one chicken market that I know, the top floor. It's only 2 stories, but it wasn't even, it was like a hut in a way, and the shingled roof was collapsing. And that was the second floor. I don't know what was up there. And down below was this live chicken market where you'd have to go and get the chickens. They'd kill them in front of you. And so, you know, it was very primal that way. And these places were used and used and used until they collapsed, basically, you know, because there were hardly any newspaper reports about any of that stuff prior to the draft riots in 1863, you know. It was just something that was cut off and forgotten about, you know. And so, in a way, it was being built as they were living in it. But at the same time, it didn't appear, in my mind, to be as fresh, let's say, as a Western town that was being created, where you had space. There was no space downtown. Everything was on top of each other. So, you know, you had the caverns below the city that we were criticized for by some people because they took it too realistically. I said, no, you understand. Growing up, we knew of these tunnels under the city. We just did. I guess, and one could say, well, you might as well talk about the alligators in the sewers. But I must say, below those tenements, they are there now, there are cellars and there are sub-cellars. And a lot of this was because of people trying to get away from, you know, scams that they were doing or trying to get away from police or rival gang members and that sort of thing. You go in one building and come out on, you go in the building on Elizabeth Street and come out on Mulberry. And you get away. It's just common sense. A lot of it's been closed off. And these things exist. So we took that and pushed it open like the old brewery and the shot in which we slice the set in half and you see all the compartments. You see all the different goings-on, nefarious goings-on in that old brewery. A number of films certainly referenced there, including, of course, you know, The Ladies' Man, Jerry Lewis, where he just splits the set and you pull back. It's an extraordinary moment, but we kept that idea. And obviously, when you see a place like that cut in half, and you see these different compartments, these different rooms, and all this activity, it's not meant to be natural. It's not meant to be realistic. You could hopefully expect anything to happen in terms of the look of this picture and behavior of the characters in the film. And so we imply that the tunnels were bigger or more intricate than one would think. But I do know it's the implication of people hiding out, people doing things underground constantly, and it still goes on everywhere. And we just took that as a concept and opened it and made it maybe slightly eccentric in a way. I became involved in a project called New York, New York, and right at the height of 75, 76, where I was in Los Angeles, and right at the height of my exuberance and love for the old Hollywood, which was being destroyed at that point. And in an attempt to retain some of it, or at least, how should I say, explore aspects of the old Hollywood, I decided to make that film in such a way that the production design, the look of the picture, would be the codified look of the studio cinema of musicals from the 40s and 50s in Hollywood, meaning that we knew that it was a code. Before Stanley Donen and Gene Kelly did New York, New York, It's a Wonderful Town, and they shot actually in New York, that opening sequence, before that, New York was usually codified. Interior sets, curbs were always a foot high. We knew that was not the real New York, but we accepted that as a real New York. We accepted the dream, the fantasy of that. I wanted to live in that world, so to speak, and put that again on the screen. And at the same time, incorporate the new style of improvisatory development of the story, improvisatory work with the actors, and place the two together, particularly in a musical with the use of, I tried to get with Laszlo Kovacs a look of three-strip Technicolor was very difficult at the time. I tried to shoot it in 133, but we had to resort to 166 for a number of technical reasons. But what was it like in those films? What were they trying to tell us, I always felt, in the use of production design and the glorification of the image, so to speak, and the implication of fantasy. And I always said, well, what happens after the end and they go off and it's supposedly live happily ever after, do they? And so I sort of went against the whole idea of it by exploring that part of it, exploring whatever truth I could find at the time in a love relationship that had to do with two very creative people, and the ups and downs of that, ultimately ending on the reality that they don't get along, which was the antithesis of the style I was showing, the style I was presenting. We even went as far as to shoot everything with a 32 millimeter lens to keep it, in a sense, if you see it on television, it should look right. It should look like an old film, you know? But I think stylization was really important in this codifying. I mean, particularly in the style of acting that was in the foreground. And when the time came to do the exterior Greenbrier, we decided to go all the way on that. Boris had a way of designing things where he would strip away the unnecessary. And in this case, the lines, the vertical lines of the trees was what it was all about. And the fact that we know it's a backdrop.
All right, you're upset because I didn't come to you in person and say goodbye, right?
Right. Which brings up another thing. You don't say goodbye to me. I say goodbye to you. In no way, shape, or form do you say goodbye to me. I say goodbye to you.
Really, it's about the people. And when you look at the two of them, the coats they're wearing, all of this ultimately is about the two of them. And in a sense, I think I may have been trying to get at why was I so involved with these people in the films that I saw when I was younger, knowing full well the background is fake. So why don't we just throw it right back at you and see if you could go with it? What does that mean? You know, you can have someone on a stage, she or he, delivering a monologue just on a stage in black, and yet you see everything. What is that about? You know, there is no set. You see. Granted, at times I feel much more comfortable in an actual location or more naturalistic sets, but I liked the abstract nature of it because I wanted to stay with the people and have the spectacle around them that was abstract, you know? You know, this is something that was an experiment in a sense, and it was a time we could experiment that way. It was amazing.